Here's one thing I learned during YC. Look, I learned that Mark Andreessen is right. The hardest thing when you're starting a startup is managing your own psychology. So when you're starting something new, there's inevitably this flat portion of the growth trajectory. Your hockey stick always takes much longer than you would hope. And before you hit that hockey stick, you'll be working hard, but on many days, you won't be sure if you're making progress. On the hardest days, it may actually feel like you're regressing, like growth is slowing, or your numbers may even go down. And this is the hardest part of the journey, right? It affects your motivation, your psychology, which, as Mark says, is the number one thing you need to manage. And what I learned at YC was how to break through, right? So perhaps the most important thing is to be clear and specific about the top metric you need to improve. Is it signups? Is it revenue? Is it the performance of your core algorithm? Is it your UX design? All these things are important, but there can only be one top metric. And you really want to write it down and share it with your team, right? And then you want to act on it, because whenever you're stuck, we like to think that action comes after motivation. But one thing, what I learned at YC was motivation comes from action, right? When you act with some purpose, it creates motivation, and if it results in progress, it creates even more motivation. So when you're not feeling motivated, when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling like you're in a funk, things don't look like they're working, don't give up, but don't spend too much time debating the perfect plan. You need to act. YC has this maxim, right? Go out and talk to users. And we added our own last bit to it, which is nothing else matters. It's a way for you to drive yourself to act, and it works. So be clear and specific about your top goal so that you and your team can act on it. Here's the one piece of advice I have for founders that are starting out today. Look, with the coronavirus pandemic, most businesses are going through a pretty tough time. And most people, especially founders, are experiencing a lot more fear. Now, fear to founders, most of my friends are founders, and myself often sounds like an F word, right? I found myself not even wanting to admit to myself when I'm, afraid. The problem with that is that it can really break that, plan and act cycle, right? That I just talked about. It can be debilitating, right? So my advice to founders starting a company today is if you hit that, and unfortunately it's likely you will, then here's what you can do. And this advice actually comes from Amy Beekler. She was formerly at YC, and it works really well for me, right? What you do is you imagine a leader or a founder that you admire, right? And ideally it's someone you're well informed about, right? Not just Steve Jobs from the movie. And you call them to mind, as Amy says, and you ask yourself, how would this model founder respond to the problem that I'm facing right now, right? And then you think about what they would do, and immediately you do it, right? Literally, just imagine what they would do and then do it yourself, right? And don't think, don't sort of noodle over too long, don't, sort of try and analyze it. Just do it. And for some people who find this fanciful, what works is to imagine yourself as an advisor. And this is weird, right? When we think about ourselves in the moment, it's hard to see, sort of the path forward objectively. But if we separate ourselves and imagine ourselves as like someone advising, your startup, it's sometimes easier, right? For others, it works better if they imagine a leader. I imagine Pradeep, who is the founder of Farmstead, another one of the YC companies often. So as Amy says, right, the deeper benefit of this practice is that you sort of develop this habit of responding to crisis as if you're the founder of your dreams. And I usually don't like just sort of, copy and pasting advice, but for the past 9 months, this has probably been one of the most useful pieces of advice I've received in my life. So again, if you're stuck, if you're feeling fear, first acknowledge it. It's okay. Everybody's feeling it. And then imagine what an ideal version of yourself or a founder or leader you admire would do, and then just do it.